Well, thank you very much for being here this morning. I know there's lots of other choices for panels to go to, and we appreciate you coming to this one. My name is Koki Smith. I'm the Washington correspondent for the Juvenile Justice Information Exchange and also Youth Today. They're both publications out of the Center for Sustainable Journalism at Kennesaw State University in Georgia. And we have here on our distinguished panel John Fleming, who's my executive editor at the Juvenile Justice Information Exchange, and Jenna Gibson, who's with CBS This Morning. And I'll ask them to briefly introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm John. I'm run the JJIE in Atlanta. Ours is what we do is sort of an experiment. That's to sort of briefly explain what it is. We moved into the area of juvenile justice because we see it as a social justice beat that's been sort of vacated by the pullback of metropolitan newspapers from this area. So we moved into that space and started trying to report what we think is a very deep and rich beat that no one else is paying attention to anymore. We've heard a lot of people in the system say that a few years ago they used to get calls like every week from beat reporters at the AJC, for example, but they don't get these calls anymore because the newsrooms are so much smaller. So now we're trying to cover with a staff of about 6 people the entire country on a daily persistent basis the subject of juvenile justice. We report from California to Maine, Washington, D.C., Florida, Texas. We try to do it all. We're foundational funded, we're a 501c3, and I should say that part of our work is because of generous donations from the MacArthur Foundation. We're very grateful for that. But as I've told my colleagues many times before, if I had a full-time staff of 50 people, I couldn't cover this beat adequately. This is a tremendously deep, complex beat, and all I can do is try to continue to grow the effort that we're trying to do right now. Thank you.
I was told to keep turning this mic, so I'm doing as I'm told. I'm Jenna. I work for CBS This Morning, your new favorite morning show. As we like to tell everyone, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., free plug, which is anchored by Charlie Rose, Nora O'Donnell, and Gayle King on CBS. I have worked in television now for about 6.5 years. I graduated from Clemson University and kind of fell into the role and have happened to love it, so I think I'll continue to do it as long as I can continue to not sleep, which is pretty much required. My main job is to be a political producer for the Washington Bureau at CBS, and that means I work with the morning show, booking guests to come on and be our newsmaker so that hopefully everyone can pick it up and read about it later. And I'm looking forward to this. I think it'll be fun.
So I'd like to start with a question. I'd like to ask how many people in this room have ever had to talk to the media as part of their job? Could you raise your hand, please? Wow. Okay, good. And how many of you enjoyed doing that? Okay, what did you enjoy about it?
I just enjoy the interaction and getting to know a reporter and what they're interested in and how I can help them and how they can help me. That's
Okay. Anybody else who enjoyed talking to the media?
I just like that. I feel like when we talk about juvenile justice, there's such a big gap in education and advocacy that they really are learning something and getting important information out.
Okay. And how many of you did not enjoy talking to the media? Can I ask why?
We had an event for Congressman Foley when he was Speaker of the House in Spokane about voting and citizen engagement. And I spent a month preparing remarks, and we did focus groups all over the city and so on. And I made a presentation. It was taped, and then it was all clipped down, taken out of context, and I sounded like a complete idiot. All my friends said, Jesus, that's the most important thing you could say for Tom Foley. And it was about a quote in the Jefferson Monument: about every 10 years you should change the form of government because you need the involve people in it, blah, 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 blah. So it's taken out of context, screwed up, and made it sound like I was a communist. So I thought, that's it, I'm not doing that anymore.
So that was Congressman Foley. Have you gotten over it? Or
Well, he lost his, in 30 years he lost, and it was right after I did this, so I caused the demise of the Speaker of the House. So first time we've ever not re-elected someone from Congress to the Speaker, city Speaker.
Well, I suspect you're not the only person in the room who's a little bit wary of talking to the media for precisely that fear, that you're going to be taken out of context, that you might be misquoted, even worse, that you might be, used to make a point that is not necessarily your own, but is mainly supporting somebody else's. Those are all relevant fears, and we're here to address some of them. So we're here to tell you why it's really important to talk to the media, why you really shouldn't run away from talking to reporters, and why it's really in the best interest of not just your organization, but the people that you serve, to be talking to reporters often and with warmth, because it really can make a difference in the kind of coverage that you get. So let's brainstorm a little bit about why it might be a good idea to talk to the media. Can you tell me some pie in the sky benefits that might happen and you might get if you talk to the media? Some good reasons. Yes.
I think sometimes, like in the state I'm from, we get a bad rep for a lot of things that have occurred in the state. But there are a lot of great things that are actually going on within our state. Mm-hmm. So to highlight that and point out some of the things that we are trying to do within our state, mm-hmm. try to make them work, and just kind of show people the whole truth, not part of the truth.
So raising awareness, yes. Right? Just increasing the public's knowledge about the full picture of what you're doing, not just small things that they might hear because of an arrest of a particular person for a particular crime, but the wider efforts that you are undertaking. Okay, other reasons that you might want to talk to the media?
I think another reason is that the more you do it, the more they begin to recognize you as an expert in an area and will come to you if they have questions about it.
Mm-hmm. So you're building relationships, right? Making yourself to be an expert on a particular subject, so when next they're covering their subject, they come to you and you have a chance to shape the narrative that they are going to be telling. Okay. Any other reasons? Yes?
To affect public opinion about the issue.
Okay. What does changing public opinion do, though? What is your ultimate goal in telling your story and making people aware of what you're doing? What is the ultimate point that you're trying to accomplish?
To get them to act.
To get them to act. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Your point is to change the way things are made, things are done. And the only way to change them is to make people aware of the way they are now. So, John and Jenna, would you have any examples that you can draw upon to kind of illustrate why some of these points are so important, things that you've seen in the course of your work that can show how change can be accomplished?
Yeah, I'll just follow up on you're from Mississippi,
yes.
Right? Are you with your juvenile justice department or what, public safety?
I work for the state, and I'm over the juvenile justice part for the state and all the federal dollars that we receive.
And so is it your department's policy for all the information to go through one person, through one PIO?
Yes.
And so reporters, do they ever get to talk to you directly?
Yes, but I have to get permission.
You got to go through that, and is he pretty good about saying okay, or does he make you fill out paperwork?
I normally have them give me a synopsis of what the interview will consist of and get approved that way, and try to stay on that line where I'm representing the state and the agency and not putting my interest or opinion in, because I don't agree with everything that's done, but at the same time I know I have a job to do, and that's actually represent the agency in a certain way.
Well, we run into problems sometimes with PIOs, especially at departments of juvenile justice and other places that won't give us free access to people like you. And we know, if we find out through the grapevine about these really cool programs that are going on in different, there's a great example in Georgia of one we've been trying to write about for a long time within OIDC near Atlanta. And it involves these kids who cut these rap records at the end of every week, and at the end of every month they have this big ceremony, and then they broadcast the rap that he wrote. I mean, it's great stuff. It's like shows the public some cool things that are going on, innovative programs that are going on in places that you wouldn't think. But it's very frustrating to us because we can't get that story.
Yeah.
And that problem lies with the bureaucrats and the communications that go on between us and those guys.
I definitely agree. One thing I had to do was build a good relationship with people up top to just kind of show how we're working and what we're doing needs to be highlighted, and we need that recognition to continue on. And I've actually had other people come in and to give us recognition for that. So it's kind of built a little relationship where they kind of built a little trust in what I've asked them to allow us to do on that.
I'd like to bring up another point about why you would want to talk to the media, and that has to do with the kids that you work with. A lot of times, I know there's some confidentiality concerns and things when you're working with children. Like, we understand that. We'll talk about that some more. But a lot of times, the children that you're working with are the ones who are the least likely to be heard by the public. And they're the ones who already have, people already feel like they have a picture of them in their heads. And so if you can help bring their voices to the forefront, then that's a really good way of accomplishing all these other goals. You just let a young kid speak. And even if you create some parameters for how that conversation will take place with a reporter, you say, I'm sorry, you cannot use his name, you cannot use his photograph, you cannot use any identifying details, but I will be happy to make this youth available to you for a conversation so you can understand yourself what his story is. And that can be an incredibly powerful tool for letting a reporter see firsthand that this is not just some kid who was born bad, that there's a story, that there's a history that led to some circumstances and then some actions. So just letting young people be heard can raise awareness, help you become a source for reporters, change public opinion, and ultimately bring about change. So let's talk a little bit about, this is what we'd like to see happen, but let's kind of go back to like the negative part. Why don't people want to talk to the media? So your example is one. Can we kind of go through the points of what other things you're afraid of that might happen when you talk to the media? So we talked about being taken out of context. Anything else? How about stereotyping? You're afraid of having your work stereotyped, your client stereotyped? Anything else?
Are any of you just camera shy? Is that the problem? Sometimes we think that.
Yeah.
You just don't want to be in front of the camera, maybe?
There's something that happens when the red light goes on. You have everything all working, the red light goes on, and then you go blank and you go.
Okay, we'll fix that before the end of this.
Yes.
So, I feel like a lot of times that whoever is calling from the media hasn't really done enough homework. So I worked for a research organization for a long time, and it was like a lot of times it wasn't a very good conversation because they didn't do a little reading before they talked to me, or weren't willing to do any reading after they talked to me, and so it just kind of ended up being just too superficial.
You're a researcher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I won't make
It's a great point, though.
So I won't make excuses for that, but occasionally, especially when you're dealing with a Metro paper that's on deadline, it's a daily paper, and something's got to be written in the next 45 minutes. It happens, and as Koki's tip sheet says, the day before the guy wrote about a carjacking, and the day after he's covering the city council meeting. Juvenile justice isn't something he knows a lot about, and he's got to get the story out fast. So I'm not making excuses, but sometimes that happens.
Well, I think your concern is really valid, and it's right on point. But it's the reality, because now as newsrooms are shrinking, you have people covering all kinds of different types of stories. You're not going to get somebody who gets your mathematical models and your research models and somebody who knows the field as well as you do. That's why they're calling you. If they knew all that, they wouldn't call you. And so part of your developing your toolkit for talking to the media is learning how to stay accurate but stay simple, and learning how to boil down what you're working on into easy to understand sound bites for video, so you get quoted the way you want because you learned a really pithy way of saying it, and a way of explaining the complicated matters that you work on, not using jargon, using simple language. I know especially for someone who works in research, it can be, it's galling to do that. It's like, well, why can't, maybe it feels disrespectful that somebody called you up and hasn't done their reading. But they're on a deadline, and they're calling you because they trust you to give them the information that's as accurate and as simple as possible. Honestly, as a reporter, if I have a big, thick report, and I know I don't have time to read the whole report, and I'm not going to understand it anyway, honestly, because I'm not a statistician. I'm going to call you as the author of that report and say, can you give me the plain English version of this? I've read the executive summary. That's what I've done. But can you tell me why this is important? And if you can't tell me why this is important, then there's something wrong. Like, why can't you tell me why it's important? So it kind of goes both ways. I agree that ideally reporters should be doing some homework before they call you. But you should also be prepared as the source to fill them in the holes of their knowledge if they have not done that reading. Because that is, as a source, that is where you can be most important. That is how you can be shaping the narrative. Because if they haven't done their reading, in a way that means they're not coming in with as many misperceptions, maybe. I don't know. But there's definitely a role there for you. Yes?
I am less troubled by ignorance than by a pre-established narrative. They're ignorant, but they have already decided what the story is. Mm-hmm. And trying to figuring out a quick, pithy way to redirect them towards a different and more important and more real story is harder.
Do you have anything to add to that, John or Jen?
I can do it. I think that going off of what Koki was saying, from a reporter standpoint, picture yourself in their shoes. So if they probably don't cover this every day. Think of when you go home for Thanksgiving and you're telling your extended family what you do. They have no idea what you do, right? So you just kind of have to tell them in 5 points, this is what I do. They just hear, oh, I do juvenile justice. What does that mean? So your job is to explain it to them. Now, if you have a hard-headed reporter, that happens and that stinks. Usually I've found that that's not the case. I'm not saying you're wrong by any means, but handling those specific people is when you just have to stand your ground and say, no, you're wrong. This is what's really happening. And at that point, the reporter can probably step back and realize, I'm not the expert in this situation. He is, or she is, and listen to what you have to say. And especially if this is on the record, then they're gonna quote what you say and hopefully not take it out of context. But I think that you just have to stand your ground there and just know that you're right and remind them of that. And you can, I mean, look, these people are people too, right? You know they're going from covering the John Edwards trial to General Petraeus to whatever's happening in Atlanta that day, school board or whatever, you know. So I think that that's the most important part.
I think, sorry, please go ahead.
Koki, Richard, I had a question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Richard.
I was just wondering when John had said, his desk now serves what nationally used to be gigantic and still not enough. But when you're dealing with a local reporter, you're saying, I'm in Kennesaw, can we have lunch and talk about what's going on? Exactly. Versus somebody from a national organization that's going in there and hitting and run, and how much access you have as a local versus the intimidation of a national. And also, what you don't have on the list of consequences is people can lose their jobs if there's negative criticism.
Absolutely, that's an important point. And with a lot of state agencies, again, it's so very strict. If anybody talks to the press without going through the PIO, boy, they'll be held to pay, and it happens a lot. So that's the problem we all have to put up with.
So let's talk about how you avoid these kinds of consequences, or how you avoid this kind of stuff from happening, because these are all really valid concerns. They happen. But I think the point that Richard made is the most important, and that's about talking to your local reporter, a local reporter versus a national reporter. You can call up a reporter and say, hey, can we do lunch? Hey, can you come over to my office for coffee? Or can I meet you at your office? Let's just sit and talk and let me tell you about what's going on. So building relationships with reporters who cover your area, whether it's a geographical area or whether it's a subject area, that is really the most important way of making sure that that you are not being, you're not like a hit and run victim. Because if you already have a relationship with a reporter, if they already kind of have an idea of what you're working on, then they're more likely to call you and use you as a source to dispel their ignorance, use you as a source so that they don't come in with predetermined opinions that you haven't had a chance to shape, and that you are not giving them any information that might jeopardize your job, because they're not going to be wanting to jeopardize your job because they like you. You know, you had lunch with them. You help them out when they're on a story. You call them back when they call you, and you make sure that they don't miss their deadlines because you're prompt in returning their calls. If they want to have some certain information, if they want to get some certain information, you find out the stats that they're looking for, or you recommend your friends or your contacts or your professional sources that they could contact for more information on a particular story. Like, you know, I don't have that answer for you, but I know somebody who does. Let me shoot you their contact info. That's immensely helpful to a reporter, and they will remember you, and they will come back to you. So building those relationships is one really great way of making sure that these negative things are minimized. Not saying they'll go away completely, but they will definitely be minimized if you develop a back and forth.
May I add a negative here that I think is
Yes.
extraordinarily important. The negatives to those of us involved in this is one thing. The negatives to the kid is much more important. If you're talking about giving a voice to youth, it has to be managed in extraordinary ways. Not to keep the truth away from the public, but to protect that child, and to be extraordinarily cognizant of what jurisdiction you're in and what the confidentiality and the role between the person arranging that interview and the kid. You know, every state has different laws about custody, guardianship, and a lot of different things that are legal. Speaking as a lawyer and a judge, that starts first if you're going to use a kid's words. And they're the most powerful we can have. But that's the first consideration.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah, I agree with Judge Timberlake, everything that he just said. It's really important that we've got a couple examples here in the room about how the power comes across. Koki just finished doing a very good story for us for our print edition of a youth detention facility that's right here in the District of Columbia, and that would have never happened had she not worked with the administration on gaining access to the kids. And we don't normally do this, but in this situation, of course we did. We let them review the photos that we took. We let them, gave access to the kids to get those words, but we were really very, very careful in how we did it. It was great working with those people. And also Richard Ross's work over the past few years in youth detention centers, he handled that enormously well, but your work would have never taken place if you not worked for those administrators and making sure that their faces were obscured, for example.
I think those are really good points, and it comes down to when you might want to say no to the media. And legal considerations is one, of course, paramount reason. Is that if you don't want to run afoul of any laws, you don't want to endanger any kids. But again, there are ways that you can make sure you're not breaking laws, but you're still granting access to people who need to know more, because ultimately, if you don't give access, not only does the reporter not know more, but the public does not know more, awareness does not change, and the system does not change. So you could find yourself you can allow yourself to be kind of circumvented by the laws, or you can try and find a way to work through them, stretch them a little bit by working with the reporter again on setting preconditions to the reporting. So like John mentioned what I did with covering DYRS in DC, I really wanted to go see their juvenile facility. They were wonderfully open about it. And we just made sure that we had a negotiation before we spoke, before I went and visited, twice actually. So I made sure that we agreed, I signed a confidentiality agreement. I agreed that I would not use any real names, that I would not take photos of any kids, that I would not take, or at least ones that showed their faces. I would not take photos of anything off the facility that would compromise the physical security of the facility, that might show, I don't know, different parts that might be compromised. But then what they did in turn was allow me to sit down with 4 kids at the facility for an hour. I talked to them for an hour. It was awesome. And I got to ask them questions and hear about what it was like for them. And nobody was telling them to shush. They were allowed to whinge about the facility. They were allowed to talk about what it was like for them, how they couldn't wait to get back to their families, but how actually it was kind of pretty good in there by the end of the hour. They came around just saying, because they actually got soap and lotion and other things that, and people who hugged them, and this was not something they were getting, people that they knew were not getting that at home. So it just being able to talk to the kids themselves can be done if you lay down certain conditions, and you can think about how you could be reaching those kinds of negotiations with people with reporters in your area. Can we Can you give some examples? Can you talk a little bit about a source where you thought you would never be able to get access to a particular thing, and what you did to get access?
How to be sneaky.
Yeah, yeah. We need some tricks here.
Gosh, a lot of times it depends on the person. Keep in mind too, everything that you tell a reporter isn't necessarily on the record. So you can come in and clarify, look, I'm gonna give you this information on background, just to help clear up the story. I'm not ready to go on the record. I'm not ready for my name to be printed everywhere, or I can talk with you off the record. Because if you don't talk at all, then all you're doing is leaving the reporter in a position to figure out the story without your side. And most likely they have the other side. So I think that that's probably one of the biggest challenges that sometimes we face on our end, is when people don't want to talk. So a lot of times we like to call and remind people, okay, we know you don't want to say this on the record or on camera or in print, but tell us what you can. And as Koki mentioned earlier, if you can't tell us, can you talk with someone? Without using names, there was a big trial fairly recently happening where this was a very public figure that we were trying to get access to. Obviously, he's kind of like, this is who we want to get on camera if we can. That clearly wasn't happening. So then we went to the next step. Think of it as like a bubble. We always say, if you throw a rock in a pond and it ripples out, right? You're trying to get that first ripple first. And if you can't get in the first ripple, you get the second ripple, then the third. So by the end of the day, we were at like the last ripple, and it was a friend of the attorney for the client that we flew to the state to sit down with, because he was helpful. He could sit down and give us information and say, I have spoken with X, Y, and Z, and I can tell you this. And that was so much more helpful than just going to an attorney who's going to say, no comment, no comment, no comment, because then we can go and give the side of the story that they're wanting to put out without officially doing so for fear of compromising the investigation or something like that. So you can be creative. And y'all can do it on your end too.
We're spreading around. And there are a lot of other programs that are very similar to the Be Within. Different places. I think you found one up here. But there is one in Alabama as well. And Alabama has anybody in here from Alabama? Except for me. Okay, I'm gonna say it has a particular reputation of being hard to work in, right? But we got in touch with these people at a YDC in Alabama, and they had one of these programs. So we used that program, or we used the people that we knew from the Be Within, who we've had this great working relationship with for a long time now, to help get us inside that thing. And once we got in and they understood what it was that we were trying to do, it came out really well on the other end. We were showing an innovative program that was making a difference in a place where nobody would think that progress would be being made in Alabama. I'm from there, so I can say that.
I'd like to ask Richard Ross, actually, who's the author and photographer of this book, to talk a little bit about how you get access to juvenile facilities. Because if you're not familiar with his book, it's amazing. And you see these photographs all the time if you're looking at articles about juvenile justice. If you can talk a little bit about how you put this book together, how you actually took these photographs, what tricks you used, that would be very helpful.
There are no tricks. And I have a friend here from Mississippi next to me who we are starting a discussion. And I'm here sitting next to him because I want to complete the discussion. I think when the judge said you have to respect the children's rights, that's critical. And when somebody from Mississippi says, well, do you have any sort of like agreement of understanding? Yeah, I do have an MOU of I would never do anything to harm the child, ever. And I sit on the floor of the cells and I listen to the kids. And some places are relatively easy to get into. Santa Barbara, California was a nightmare for a year and a half to get into. And it's where I live and where I've been a professor for 35 years. So everything's very counterintuitive about this world. But there's a driving force that you have to pay attention to these kids because their needs are so compelling and their voice are so fragile that you just have to do it. You can't accept no for an answer. And you have to listen to people that will say, make sure the kids are protected. And you have to deal with institutions that you you have to turn to a different picture because my friend from Mississippi doesn't want that image shown anymore because apparently it's changed. But when it's changed, you have to invite the journalist, the photographer, the reporter back there to say it has changed. You have to either obliterate the light completely and keep things in darkness, which is very dangerous for these kids if you're an administrator, or else you have to just show really bright light on it. So if you're you can't accept no as an answer, and you just have to figure out a way to make the case. Some cases it's so frustrating that, yeah, I do beat my head against the wall. It's 100 emails, it's 100 phone calls, and I just feel I'll never get there. But I'm not on a national deadline, I'm not on a daily deadline, and I'm paid for by the University of California, and I have health insurance. If I didn't have those things, and if I didn't have the determination of somebody who's on Medicare, and my kids are grown, I couldn't take my own resources and put it into these kids like this if I didn't have those opportunities. But you have to just feel like it's something that must be done.
And see, what Richard is describing, it shouldn't be that hard to get in to see what conditions the kids are living in. And so it really can be up to you to make it a little bit easier for folks like Richard and for folks like us to get in and actually see what's going on and be able to meet some of the kids. And so if you can see the results of Richard's work, can you talk a little bit about the impact your photographs have had? Because I think that's really important in getting to our point. Like, why are we advocating for this?
It's gotten a lot of national press. It's put a lot of attention on the subject. It's moved the discussion maybe 1% forward. I'll be modest enough to say it has had some impact. But anybody that wants to use these images that's a nonprofit, I give them to them.
Thank you.
It's a great marketing system for failure. But it doesn't have any impact nationally like it does on me. When I sit and talk to a girl, and all the girls are victims, and I'll say that absolutely. You know, a 7-year-old that's given meth by her family and ends up a prostitute, why is she in a detention center? And these go on endlessly. So I'm coming to these conferences to listen. Occasionally I'll speak here. I'll show the work, but I'm trying to give an example. I'm actually speaking to 5,000 kids at a conference of juvenile journalists in San Francisco in April. I'm nervous about that one and excited about that one because I feel like I can give them the idea that an individual can do something. And if you're a reporter, that's what you live for. I mean, Seymour Hersh is a hero. You know, these are the people that the back of my neck gets chills when I say his name. I mean, people like that, they're the ones that you want to emulate to try and change a system that is bad, moving forward, is getting better, and you want to make friends along the way, not betray your sources in any way, not do things in the dark, not how do you sneak your way in? You don't, not when you're working with these kids. You have to be very honest about it. But then contextualizing it, you have to make sure you're not betraying. You have to give your sources a heads up on where it's running and how it's running. And I'm learning all that for the past 6 or 7 years. That's what I'm learning.
And Richard is being kind of modest about the impact of his work because he's showing individuals and how they're impacted by being in the system. His work has been shown in Supreme Court hearings, it's been shown in congressional hearings. It's the only way some people can visualize what kids go through. And so that kind of brings us back to why storytelling is important, why telling individual stories is important of individual kids, because that's really the only way people can kind of boil down what something means. We can use all the jargon in the world, right? You can say, disproportionate minority contact. You can say all kinds of, even just the word juvenile, the term juvenile justice. It all sounds really sterile after a while. It ceases to have meaning. But if you say kids behind bars, children in prison, and you actually illustrate that with one person, one kid, that is immensely powerful, and that's the kind of coverage that we urge you to try and solicit from us by bringing those stories to us. And I'm sorry, you had a question earlier, or a comment.
It wasn't a question. I was just going to give an example of the impact on one person of Mr. Ross's photos. I was at the National Juvenile Justice Network had a forum in Austin last summer, and we showed your photos, and they were kind of out in the hallway as well as in the in the room. And I got into a conversation with one of the state police there, who was patrolling the building, and he made it clear really quickly that his attitude about the juvenile justice system was that the kids who were there were, all deserved to be there and probably deserved worse than they were getting, that kind of sort of thing. And but we were standing in front of that photo of the one with the, I don't know, he must be like an 8-year-old kid in like the yellow jumpsuit with the boarded up cell, boarded up windows, and I mean you can see this immensity of the institution. You see the tininess of the kid. I mean, it just really brings it home really well. And we were talking, and I was trying to kind of sort of bring him around a little bit, and he looked at that and he said, "That's not in this country, is it?" So that's a third world country. And I said, "That's exactly what we're fighting." And he rocked him. And granted, I mean, he's not going to come all the way over to, in terms of his thinking on it, but it was an opening. And I thought that was a great metaphor for sort of what I think a lot of people experience when they see those photos. They don't, that was for the general public, I think the juvenile justice system is an abstraction, and there's an assumption that, kids are held accountable, but that they are either mollycoddled or that they are well taken care of. And just, both aren't true.
So I'd like to do some concrete kind of brainstorming about the kinds of stories you could be pitching yourself to reporters, because we talked about, here are some problems that that are general concerns, not being quoted accurately, being stereotyped, getting negative coverage, and then we talked about ways you can avoid that, by building relationships with reporters, by being proactive in approaching them with stories, by actually suggesting your own ideas. And so what I'd like to do now is solicit some story ideas so we can look at maybe the different types of stories that the press likes to do, whether they're broadcast media or online media or print media. And let's talk about stories from your locality that you wish was being covered right now but are not being covered because maybe people aren't interested, maybe people don't know about them. So there's different types of stories. You can have general kind of news. You can have human interest. John, would you like to explain a little bit what each of these are, do you think? Or
news stories are, they're happening fast, and we don't try to compete with Reuters or the AP. We can't do that on the JJIE side, but Reuters reporter might call you. You need to have a reaction to something that's happening. Human interest feature stories are, the writing program. Here's an example of a best practice that can be implemented anywhere, from Washington to Florida. Investigative pieces take a lot of work, and we do some of them, but the ones that we do are in cooperation with the Center for Public Integrity here in DC. And these are usually numbers-based stories that get into systemic problems, and they go very, very deep. Profiles and Q&As are those are useful, usually in support of longer pieces that are being done. We'll have what we call sidebars, that there's the expert in the field. We sit down and we go through the different questions with them. Editorials, that says? Yeah. Judge Timberlake, your piece is posting on Wednesday, your op-ed piece. It's your second one. It's been great having the judge on our page because he writes from this position of knowledge. He's seen all this stuff before, and it's extraordinarily helpful to so many people to read that. It's like, oh, that's what it's like to be a judge in a juvenile court, to see stuff coming through. We do a lot of photo essays on a kind of sister site that we have called the Boca, and Richard's stuff has appeared there, but we display a lot of things on that side. We do some stuff from kids too, and this is about how kids see the world, as much as it is sort of, what kids are suffering through in juvenile detention. And online videos that would be a nice quick segue to what we're going to do pretty quickly here, which is we're going to have a booth set up. We'll call it a booth. It's a video camera set up down at the end of the hallway, where we will invite you all and everybody else at the conference to come tell us a story. We'd like to keep it short, to 2 or 3 minutes, but when we put those videos together, if the technology works, if we're fast enough, we'll be posting those throughout the conference. we'd like for people to sit and just tell us what you're doing. Tell us an interesting story. Tell us the best practice, and we'll turn it around.
Yes.
Before you go into like how to brainstorm on these, I think it's also important to note that the media, we know the media is such a strong tool, and yes, there are reporters and journalists, but we can be creating our own media to pull journalists and people in that people think are interesting. And so you don't always have to wait on, you know, the reporter in your state or the reporter from Reuters or, you know, the journalist, the photojournalist, you know, Mr. Ross to come in and say, hey, I think this is interesting, tell me about it. You can create your own media and tell other people about it, so you make yourself interesting and your work interesting. So I think sometimes we overlook the fact that, you know, we can put our own selves out there. You know, everybody has an iPhone.
That's an excellent point. And actually, and reporters, if they're any good at their job, will be looking at what you're putting out for story ideas. Yes.
I just want to point attention to a couple of things in the flash drive. Were something that did just that in Washington State, where we worked with our media communication partners and did this truancy reform video that, and then a corresponding handout that related to it that's on the flash drives if people are interested in looking at that.
Great, thank you. And I mean, social media is a great way to tell your own story, right? And then a wider, you know, publication might look at what you're putting out and want to cover that more extensively. So definitely, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Given in the interest of time, I'd like to kind of segue from online videos to Jenna and have her give some tips on how you can be more effective on camera, because video is one of the most compelling ways that you can tell stories. And as somebody who works in broadcast, she has some good advice.
And coming off of this, one thing that I'd like to note with what you just said, it's really great if you are looking to pitch a story to media and get your story out there. If you can send the reporter a visual, it is so much easier than just writing a 3-paragraph email to somebody who is totally swamped on something else. They're going to delete it. But if you can give a link or a photo without clogging the inbox, which is sometimes challenging, that's huge, because that's the best way to sell what you're doing. As far as television goes. Oh, and the other point I wanted to make is also know what's going on in the world, whether this is local or national that you're pitching. It's not helpful to send a story, even if you're local and you live in New Jersey, about what you're doing when Hurricane Sandy is happening. And I know that sounds so common sense, but this happens all the time. So just in case you were thinking about it, know that you're not going to get covered on Tuesday when the storm's hitting, you know, Tuesday morning or something. So be aware of that. Now, as far as on camera goes, I kind of wrote down 5 points that I think are most helpful. The first is to know your topic, which sounds easy, but especially if you are a little bit camera shy, if you know what you're talking about, you have nothing to be afraid of, because you know more than they do already. So go in knowing that you know what you're talking about, meaning be prepared, know what you have to say. And then also be prepared for what they are going to ask you. On our end, when we prep questions for folks, if we're prepping questions for the anchors or the reporter or whomever, the first thing we do is write the question, anticipate what the person is going to say, and then develop the second question based on the first answer. Does that make sense? So you guys can do that too. When you go in, anticipate what the questions are going to be. If I answer this, then they're probably going to ask this. And that way you're prepped more so that you don't have to be taken out of context, hopefully, because you've already got your rebuttal ready to go. Secondly, if you can get a free interview, accept the invitation for one. That happens almost always in national media, especially if you're working on a local story that you're not as up to speed on. Part of our job is to call and find out what the person is going to say. And that helps both sides, because at that point, you know what they're going to ask. There shouldn't be any secrets that are hidden that are going to come out when you actually are on camera. And you can prep them. A lot of times when we call people, we don't know that, oh, this hearing is happening tomorrow, or this kid said this, but it's not out yet, but it's going to be. So you're ready for that. And ask questions as I go if I start losing you at all. The third thing is to sleep good, look good, and feel good. And I say that because, if you are worked up about it, one way or the other, try to get a good night's rest. Just chill out, have a glass of red wine, a little milk if you prefer, get some rest. A lot of times in media, they may have powder, especially on national. They'll have makeup for you, so you don't have to worry about necessarily what you look like on that angle. But if you're rested, then you're probably a little more prepared going in. The fourth thing, and this is important in television, you have to have personality. Face it, this is a visual medium. You gotta look not a certain way, but you don't want to come in a t-shirt with your Hard Rock Cafe logo on it and your hair a mess. You know, and what you say has to be relatable for anybody. So if you're going to come in and talk about juvenile justice and you just sit here and you're like, and then there was this kid and he had this really sad story and then I was going to, no one cares. No matter how sad the story is, nobody cares. So you have to sell it. Sell yourself, sell the story. And that's something that you can work with the producer before you go in. And practice in the mirror. It sounds silly, but sit in the mirror and watch yourself. Do you look boring when you talk? You might want to fix it. Good TV, good TV. It's good for ratings, it's good for everybody, and if they like you, they'll ask you back. And that goes with the building the relationship and the trust issue. Lastly, follow up on how you did. And that's a simple phone call. Let's say for our segments, we allow maybe 5 to 7 minutes. You go on air, you say XYZ, here are my points. You have to be succinct with them, mind you. You cannot get on there and write a novel on television. No one cares. You've lost them, you know. So follow up. Call the producer and say, how'd I do? What can I do better? This was my first time. This was my second time. Did I stink? Did I lose you in the beginning? Did you like how I looked this way or this way? Because they appreciate that, for one thing, because you took the time to follow up. And also it helps you. You can also set your DVR, or you can go back and look at the link if it's posted online, and look at yourself. And you can tell from your own self. You can say, oh God, I sounded so much better in my head, but when I saw myself, I was miserable. Or I was amazing, I should do this more often. So those are the 5 tips there. Do y'all have any questions as far as television goes? Sure.
How should you handle situations where they ask you questions that you shouldn't comment on?
You can address that in the pre-interview. So if you go in and you say, I can tell you A, B, C, but I can't tell you D, then the producer's job is to relate that to the reporter and the anchor. All that is dead air. They're not going to want to touch on it unless it's newsy enough that they have to ask you, and it would be irresponsible journalistically if they didn't. And you can always say, this is an ongoing investigation, or this, you know, that I don't want to talk about this, but spin it, but I can tell you this. That way it keeps the conversation going, and they get your point. They're not going to hammer you on something that they know they can't get out of you, especially if it's for legal reasons. Everyone understands that. Now, if you're just straight up lying, then we'll come back to you and say, you didn't tell me that in the pre-interview.
Any other questions for Jenna?
I have a comment. We have at Washington State University, where I'm from, we have the Edward R. Murrow School of Communications.
Oh, very good.
There's a sharp divide among faculty and among students on what journalism requires. So on the one side, you have advocates of civic journalism, and if there's a story like this that needs to be told, it's part of your obligation as a journalist to help the people who are in the details of it get to the next level. And Sean Vessel is an example of civic journalism. But there's the other side that says our job is to police the government and its agencies and all the people who are misleading the public with their PR and crap like that. So when you're, I'm not crap like that, from that point of view. So when you're dealing with journalists, you know, what branch of journalism are they coming from? And the people you're talking about, the kind that you do, you become a partner in telling the story that needs to be told. And you have to have some liberties, and they have to take some risks to work with you, and you develop the relationship. But the other type is I got you journalists, and I got a storyline, and I'm going to sneak it up. And what the best of all is to catch you when you're not aware that they know something that, you know. And so that's why we. Part of this is to find a team on the journalism side that is capable of helping you make that argument. And it's much more believable if it comes outside of your own words and it's put together by someone else. So how to make that happen for this area is the stories, like Starsha's story or other people's stories. People can get around that human element, and then the community can understand its stake in it. They have kids, or they were there before, like we were talking about earlier today. So this is very useful, but it's really, the journalists themselves have to step up and identify themselves what kind of partnership they want. They want that, I want to get you when you're not looking, or I want to help you make a story.
John, do you want to, sorry, go ahead. Do you want to address that?
Well, I was just going to add, sorry.
Add, please.
On that part, that's also knowing what medium you're going to. If you're going on primetime cable, granted this is back to national because this is what I do, sorry, but you know what you're getting into. If you're going to talk to Chris Matthews or Sean Hannity, you know what you're getting into. So, you know, like you said, that be aware of who you're speaking with, because that's how you know what questions they're going to ask you, and you know who those gotcha folks are. And if they are local reporters and you've read their work, which you should be doing if you're going to be talking with them, you should know what angle they're coming from, so that you're prepared for that. And at that point, you can choose. I don't want to talk to that person. I'd rather talk to this person, because they're going to give you a straight interview. CBS this morning. Go ahead.
I guess I'm more of a purist about journalism. I came from that school. I'm an old broadsheet guy. I worked for Reuters for years. You know, it's just about the facts, and it's about getting the story. I'm not about gotcha journalism, and we're in a different era now when we're such a tiny staff, and I'm trying to cover the whole country, so I have to have good relationships with people. That's not to say that I won't get you if I find out that public corruption is occurring. That's my job as much as it is anything else. But I have to develop relationships if I ever get a story. Otherwise, I'll never get inside that YDC in Alabama, and it wouldn't happen in DC either.
Well, we wanted to kind of segue from this to seeing if there are some brave volunteers in this room who'd be willing to kind of do a mock interview with Jenna.
Who wants to be on
camera? Yeah, and then we can kind of practice the tips that she just gave, and you can tell a story, and we can kind of look at what kind of critique she comes up with. So, would you like to go first? What's your name, please?
All right.
Simone Sanders. Okay.
Okay. So let's sit down. Let's pull a chair over, because most likely you'll be.
You gonna get your Katie Couric on?
No, I'm gonna get my Norah O'Donnell.
Wrong network.
Wrong network.
Is this good?
So I guess normally the camera would be closer, or?
The camera's probably about right where I am. Okay. It's in your face, which is fine. Okay. So what do you want to talk about? Let's pick a topic first.
Let's talk about youth engagement
Okay.
on the topic of juvenile justice.
Okay. Anything in particular, like a
Youth voice, an engaging youth voice, not tokenism, but really effective, positive youth engagement.
Okay. So we're rolling.
Okay.
First, tell us your name. Maybe this is for tape. Or
My name is Simone Sanders, S-Y, M as in Mary, O, N as in Nancy, E.
Okay. And tell us what you do. What's your organization?
I am with the Coalition for Juvenile Justice. I am the National Youth Chair of the Youth Committee for Juvenile Justice.
Okay.
CJJ.
And you would like to talk about today engaging youth.
Engaging youth, positive, effective youth engagement.
Okay. Tell me first what's your easiest way to do that? What's your go-to way to do that?
Speaking to youth.
Okay. Critique number one. You got to give me more than that. Speaking to youth leads me to my next question. So roll with that. Speaking to youth, how?
Speaking to youth on the front lines and asking them, what they think, how they feel, getting their actual angle and perspective.
Okay, and how do you find said youth? Are there particular groups that you focus on?
I think definitely those groups that work with young people. So your Girls Inc., your Boys and Girls Clubs, the youth, maybe if you want system-involved youth, you get to go to those detention centers, the youth in the system. They're everywhere. You just got to pick and find them.
Okay, and because youth are a protected category, how do you sit down and talk with them and kind of get through the adults so that you can have an engaging conversation with them?
I think you have to go to those people who are in charge of those centers, and so you have to build those relationships with those, those center directors, those PO people, those individuals.
Okay, this is very good. She's engaging. B, she is full of information, and C, you're speaking in kind of talking points, which television people love, because you can write that down. You get that you got 3 minutes to develop something. The only critique I would have is, again, elaborating on what you said, which we fixed in the beginning. Always sit up straight. Remember who you're looking to. I'm your mother. Sit up straight. And that's great. Yay!
Yay! Good job. Do we have another brave volunteer?
Get another volunteer.
Does anybody want to come up and be really bad?
I'll go, but I should take the gun out.
Leave it.
Oh,
Be bad.
sorry.
Leave the gun.
You want to be bad? Oh, be bad. Oh, yeah. That's fine. I already know. I'll sit.
Monica, you got to go first.
Here we go.
Hi. I'm Jenna.
Hi, my name's Starsha Egg. You?
Wait, what's your name?
Starsha.
Starsha. And what do you do?
I work at the University of Washington as a research coordinator with the Division of Public Behavior Health and Justice Policy.
Okay, and what would you like to talk with us about today?
I would love to talk with you and let you know that we are only one of 6 states that sell and distribute juvenile records.
Okay. And what do you hope to accomplish being here today?
I would really love for the law to be changed. So, and to treat the juvenile adjudications just like we treat our dependency cases, just not open to the public, but the court hearings are still open.
Okay, very good. Out of this, I need more. Give me a little more personality. You're doing great. The information's good.
Okay.
Try not
with my hands.
Well, I probably talk with my hands too much. Quick, and it's distracting. But try not to look down.
Okay.
Because as soon as you look down, you lose contact with whom you're talking to.
All right.
Pretend you're at your family's holiday table. It's December, we're kicking it, we're having a little ham. And I'm telling you about this topic. Okay, so keep going.
Okay, so the reason that juvenile records I think should be not publicly disseminated is because we're talking about the most vulnerable youth in Washington State. We're talking about youth that have been raped, abused, neglect, and they don't have 50% of the youth have been in foster care before, and they don't have family support, and we know that the overrepresentation in the system is disproportionate and super high, and so if we're really going to deem these youth rehabilitated and send them to the community, the same place that land them there to begin with this barrier of a juvenile record, they're not going to be able to get jobs or apply for certain colleges or housing.
This is good. Do you guys have critiques? Do you want to have anything?
Gotta be more alive. I don't know.
It's good. It's good. It takes practice sometimes.
Personality.
It really does. No, you've got personality. It's oozing from you. It's just what it's what the camera picks up.
Oh.
But it's very good. And again, a lot of that is like looking in the mirror and being like, okay, let me tell you about these records. And then you
I'm gonna practice.
Yeah.
We can take a couple more volunteers. I think we have the time to do that. And in the meantime, could you also be thinking about some story idea that you'd like to pass on to us based on the list that we have on the flip chart here? Just some ideas for things that you think we should be covering, or just ideas you could be pitching to local media. And we'll take a couple more volunteers. Are you gonna do it?
We love story ideas.
Come into
We're
my
always short of them. We have an insatiable appetite for story ideas, op-eds. Please, just give them to me. I'll use them. I promise.
I'm sorry, sir. Can you sit up straight? Just a little bit. You're real hunched, and you kind of look fat on TV. Okay, a little bit straighter. If you want, maybe a little shoulders back. A little bit like can you just try to straighten your head? Okay, and can you look at me? Just pretend that I'm the camera and like I'm your wife. Just regular old conversation. This isn't hard. Okay, your name and your organization.
I'm John. I work for this.
Okay, John. I'm sorry. Can you keep eye contact with me and maybe be interesting a little bit? Okay. Go ahead, John. I'm right here.
My name's John. I work for this thing called the Juvenile Justice Exchange in Georgia.
Okay. Do you hate what you do?
I really enjoy it.
Okay, because you kind of seem like you hate it a little bit. So maybe if you can just give me a little personality and like you're really excited about it. Tell me about juvenile justice information.
I'm John. I work for the Juvenile Justice Information Exchange in Atlanta, Georgia.
Do you have something in your eye? I mean, you kind of got a little blink thing going. Okay, maybe we can get you a glass of water and let's try again. Okay, so what do you want to talk to us about today?
I would like to talk to you about my news service. It's called the Juvenile Justice Information Exchange. We're in Atlanta, but we cover the whole nation. We cover the beat of juvenile justice. There are thousands and thousands of kids who are in detention, and we try to focus on that and the system in general.
Okay, very good. And if you can just give me a little bit more personality, what are you hope? Is there any particular focus that you're aiming to?
Well, we try to shine a light on the best practices, but we also try to shine a light on those problems within the system. There are some towering injustices. You might not know about it, but there are some towering injustices that exist within the system. So we try to root those out, and we try to shine a light on those and show people. But there are also good stories to tell. There are a lot of best practices to talk about, and we try very hard to get at those too.
Okay, if we can just cut the camera for just a second. I kind of feel like you're yelling at me a little bit, so, and I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I just want to make sure your story gets told, and you kind of be a great tape guest, because everybody can make fun of you later. But there you go. You just sit up straight.
Be more relaxed.
Yeah. Okay, now continue.
Take my.
Okay, so just unfold your arm, just say man. Go ahead.
What do you want to know?
Tell me, how is Georgia this time of year?
Weather's nice. What'd you have for breakfast?
This is actually quite good. See, I feel like I should point this out too, there's a good difference between tape guest and live guest.
I would never do anything live.
That last character was actually quite good for tape. Why are your hands on your hips, John? Do you want to just shake out? Okay, anybody have critiques? What did he do wrong?
I did everything.
But that happens a lot. And a lot of times we get the people who come in, let's say we're talking about taxes, kill yourself topic as it is, but you have to get somebody to talk about it. Well, so let me tell you about this tax reform that we have going. There's this thing called the fiscal cliff coming, and these Democrats, man, and these Republicans, they just don't talk to each other. You get that a lot, but if you can be engaging, your taxes are going to go up, and here is why. You got to relate to the viewer immediately.
Okay, someone better than me now, please.
Who else?
One more, right? We got time.
Yeah, we have time for one more volunteer. Please go ahead.
Oh, Julie. Sorry.
What? No, what is that laughing about?
I
stink at this.
I can't believe
No.
that.
I'm sure you're fabulous. No. I have a lot of personality, but I stink at this.
No, I don't believe it.
Julie, note that it's being recorded over here.
Oh, okay. No, I actually do stink at this.
Well, it's over here to make you better.
All right, here we go.
Now, what's your name, Julie?
My name is Julie.
Julie, and what do you do?
I'm the director of the Children and Family Justice Center in Chicago.
Oh, very good. Chicago's a great town. Look, you're looking good already. Okay, tell us a little bit about what you do and what you would like your message to be.
Well, I don't know what my message should be, which is why I came up and volunteered for this thing today. What do? I represent children who are in conflict with the law. I represent kids in, my office has social workers and lawyers, and we train young lawyers who want to be juvenile defenders. Sometimes they want to be juvenile prosecutors, and I can't kick them out of my class. But mostly we try and teach juvenile defenders. We are working on many issues. We're trying to raise the age of juvenile court jurisdiction. We're trying to eliminate juvenile life without parole. We're trying to help there be fair sentencing for kids. We're trying to, but I think we should talk about juvenile sex offenders.
Okay.
Because I think it's a really hard topic to talk about. And I think that, so I think we should talk about that.
Okay, and what's your thought on this? You can relax a little bit. You're moving a lot.
Okay, yeah.
But you're good. Your face is great. But on camera, your body's kind of doing this.
Okay, I'll try and see. Because I'm not knitting. I think what I'd like to talk about is I think that it's a really hard topic for people to talk about because it makes us all very uncomfortable. And I think in society, we think that putting kids in prisons, and I think that society thinks that putting kids on sex offender registries is going to keep us all safe. And I don't agree with that, and I don't think that's, so I'd like to be able to communicate to the public and to legislators if there's a different approach that we could take with kids who, and I don't even like the term juvenile sex offenders. I'd like for us to come up with a different way to talk about these kids, because quite frankly, I think that a lot of kids do things that are inappropriate sexually when they're teenagers, a lot of experimenting, and what we see is a lot of those kids who are kids of color or in different communities end up in the juvenile justice system versus in a boarding school where they'd be sent away or have a different kind of consequence. So I don't know how to talk about this subject with a lot of people, but I think it's really important to talk
Okay,
about.
let me point out what you just did there. You might think, oh, that's not good. That was actually very good. Because if you bring in, again, I go crazy with the hand gestures too much, but that is like, here's the point I'm making, and this is why, and I'm not bored with you just sitting here talking to me. So this is good. You're doing. Why do you think you suck at this?
She's good at it. She's a pro. She doesn't want to tell anyone.
No, okay. Anyway.
No, it's good. What are your guys' critiques? Do you have any?
She keeps
Judge?
saying that she doesn't know how to talk about it, but she's talking about it great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is a mock.
Your question. She didn't.
This is
She
a
just
mock.
sat there and listened.
I did. I just listened to what you had to say.
Okay, well, I'll try.
You did a great job.
Well, I always say no when reporters call me.
Have an example, a story to tell about sex offenders? Or a
Oh yeah, I do, actually. I could tell you a story about a client of mine. Here's a great story to tell. So here you have, this is one of the problems I think in society is, I represent kids who have been on the sex offender register for many years, and the consequences of being in are quite draconian. For example, we had a young man, who I won't tell you his name, who was on probation for a sex offense, and he got into Loyola College, which is a university in our city, which is huge for any kid to be able to get into college in the first place. He also won a scholarship from the probation department. Well, when the university found out, they kicked him out of school just because he was on the sex offender registry. And that happens all the time. And I don't think that the public knows how the collateral consequences of being on the registry is exactly antithetical to what we're trying to do with rehabilitating kids when they can't even go to college, when they're otherwise accepted to go to college, but yet they get kicked out for something that they did 5 years ago.
So what was your first step at that point when the kid gets kicked out of college? You jump in and do what?
Well, we failed, to be honest.
But
and so that's a problem. That's another thing I want to talk about with you all, because you only want success stories. And so this is what happened. I'll tell you exactly what happened. First of all, we tried to get lawyers all over the city of Chicago to represent this boy. But of course, no lawyer is going to take down Loyola University. It's the Catholic Church. So that's number one. We couldn't get we couldn't get a volunteer attorney. Okay. So number two, we try and convince Loyola that it was unreasonable. Well, they said too bad. So then we tried to go to court because, well, it's really technical, and I'll try and explain it.
This is good. It's technical, but you got to break it down into television.
I'm going to try. We tried to go to court to get him off the registry early, but the judge said the statute limit that he hadn't served his time, so he couldn't get off early enough to go to college. So we tried to go to court. So basically, we failed. He got kicked out of Loyola. We eventually got him off the sex offender registry. And eventually he did get into another college, but he lost his scholarship.
So are you continuing talking to Loyola about what's going on and how you can prevent this?
Well, I don't think we're trying, but it's happened at DePaul also, which is another university in Chicago, and we are trying to figure it out. But actually what we're trying to do on the Juvenile Justice Commission is trying to tell legislators that putting kids on registries is wrong as a punishment from the beginning.
And what do you tell to those people that come in and they say, devil's advocate, they come in and say, look, you committed a crime here. You have to pay for what you did.
We understand that, and we're not saying that these children don't pay for their crime. They either go on probation, they serve in the prisons, they have the punishment. But what happens is when you put a juvenile on a registry, you're not, let's see, what's the succinct way of saying this? You're not, it's a falsehood to think that the public's going to be safe, and yet you are also destroying this child's life and the life of all their friends and family.
You know, it'd be nice if you could do it.
I don't
go
hesitate
through
to
it.
think that, yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm with you. Let's say this is kind of a long-term topic that we can cover
Yes.
in the media. So why don't we take this kid, this particular kid, and see how he does going forward.
Okay.
And if he has this great success story
At his new college.
then you reapproach the media and you say, this happened in the past, but look at what's happening to this kid now, and this is why he should have never
Been on the registry. Why we need to abolish the registry.
Exactly, and make it into a longer term story. Because you're right, often the media, either they care about the stories that are just terrible and everyone's failing, i.e. Congress, or they care about the
Well, I think that, you know,
performers.
there's a particular problem, and certainly in our office, in my office, we have an innocence project, and so they get a lot of press because everyone cares about the innocent being wrongly convicted, whereas we, quite frankly, a lot of our kids have made some of them small mistakes, some of them large mistakes, but the point of our work is to try and minimize the consequences so they can move on.
Okay, and so perhaps if you can turn this into a specific success story, then that might be something that you can sell as a pitch.
All right, I'll try and talk to the media.
It was good. You
That's a great topic, by the way. It's one that we've dabbled in to try to get into it a little bit, but what she was just talking about, Dan, I could, with the proper resources, I could take that and do a months-long project, 6 months long project on it. So many different aspects of it.
So you didn't answer the question, but it seems like with the kinds of cases that Julie talked about, it happens a lot where you're waiting for the question to ask, so what did you do? And this is, I think, the fear of lawyers who represent kids to really worry about the exposure to sort of being judged again and people not being able to understand sort of the system. And I guess my question for you is, why didn't you ask that question? And when you get the question asked, how do you answer it?
The question about what we do?
Yeah, what did the kid do? What did the youth
Oh,
do?
yeah.
What time did he
See,
get?
that's why I never answer their phone calls, actually. That's why I want I try not to talk to them because it's, I mean, and I think what I was saying, honestly, about working at my office, where we have an innocence project, where everyone wants to tell me the story about the person who's wrongfully convicted, who's innocent. And, I mean, there are state's attorneys in the room, my clients are not innocent. I mean, mostly they're not. I mean, maybe we get 1.5, but it's very hard because, you know, sure, we have some kids that did, like that kid on the movie, like is being arrested for, what was he did?
His parents bought him a
Oh, his parents, oh yeah, well, once in a while you get that client.
Right.
But let's be honest, that's not who our clients are. So they're carrying a gun. I mean, I don't know, it's impossible. That's why I don't answer the phone.
So we're running out of time, but I would like to really address this. I think it's a really important question because, especially if you're avoiding phone calls because you're afraid of being asked that question, and it is a question that's going to come up. People want to know. So what did he do? Because obviously it's human curiosity. It's what stories aim to answer. What's a way that you could answer that question without violating whatever laws you have to follow, LaShawn?
I always negotiate in advance. So usually and that's a question that comes up in every story that I've done, a positive story about a youth who's overcome odds and is on the right track or is on their way on the right track or inside the center. You get those questions all the time. So either I negotiate in advance, I obviously have to get waivers signed between the lawyer, the youth, their family, and those are the conversations that I have up front with the youth. They tell me what they want and I honor that. The other way that I've gone around it is I give a series of, so for a national piece that I did, I gave a series of offenses that these youth who they interviewed could have committed.
Could have committed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's kind of like, here's a range.
Exactly.
I'm not being specific.
So from shoplifting to armed robbery.
But I think that the issue for me, I mean, I can fake I don't have to tell about a story about a particular person. And one thing that I do, if I'm storytelling, not to the media, but in talking about what we do, is have a composite child. So I never tell, oh, that boy is a true story, although I didn't tell you what his crime was, but I try and tell a composite story. So it's not really, it's a hypothetical child that I've represented. But I think the issue for me is really when I say I were to tell you that he raped somebody, does everyone not now care about that kid? I mean, that's the point. If it was a Romeo and Juliet and he was just two boys, you know, or a boy figuring out that he was gay and so they were, you know, messing around, two boys messing around, and the other kid decided he wasn't gay, so he you know, files a charge against him. Okay, that's one story. But what if he was a rapist? Then you're dead in the water. And that's why, what if he had a gun? What if he was walking around carrying a gun? Does everyone now not care about my client? I mean, that's actually why I don't pick up the phone. Truth be told.
We had another comment.
But I think that that's really the challenge, right? Because what we know about what the system does and doesn't do for kids makes clear that if the kid is carrying a gun, even if the kid is carrying a gun, when he's 25, he's probably not going to be carrying a gun anymore,
true.
right? So we need to figure out a way to be honest about what our clients are charged with, but at the same time frame it in the way we need to frame it, which is, yes, but Here's what we know. Here's what we know about what happens to kids when they go to prison. Here's what we know about what happens to kids who are on the registry. Here's what we know about collateral consequences. And here are the stories we can tell about our clients who want to get out there and make something different of their lives but can't because of the policies they confronted when they were in. Yes. That's, you know, that's it. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sort of echoing, amplifying that, one of the things about juvenile sex offenders is that treatment works. The recidivism rates are very, very low. These kids make mistakes as children, but they grow out of it and they're not dangerous to harm their life. It serves no purpose except to harm them.
And you should use those numbers in interviews if you're talking about it. Look, this kid was 14 at the time or whatever. Because I think people can relate to the fact that if they are really young and this happens, people make mistakes. And I think that people understand that and accept that.
So I'm afraid we need to wrap up, but I'd like to just kind of sum up by saying that the little practice session we did, if you could take those tips and look at the handouts that we've passed out that give you some more advice for how you could prepare for interviews. And if you can combine that with what we just talked about, which is that sometimes the stories are messy. There's not going to be a straight success. And that's kind of the point. You have to get the stories out there. So if you can, if we accomplish anything this morning, if it's to make you a little bit more comfortable with the idea of talking to a reporter, be more likely to answer their phone calls, then we'd have done our job. So if you could, please look at the handouts. If you feel inspired, there's a video booth outside on this floor. And we have a camera person standing by who will be happy to interview you on camera. You can do a little session like this with her. Her name is Megan. And we will tape you. Your words will be edited into a short video, and we will upload it to jjie.org, which is the website for the Juvenile Justice Information Exchange, and you too can have your story told. So thank you so much for being here this morning. We really appreciate it. We hope you guys enjoyed it.